Everybody keeps telling me that there's no reason to make a doc that's in between 70 and 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
Like it has to either be
short,
below 15
or longer.
full.
Yeah.
Length.
So are you getting funding from some?
Not really.
You're just doing this yourself?
I have 2 small private donations that were made.
Cool.
And then these shows. But, what I've been telling people is that after these shows, right now we're about $700 in the hole.
Oh, that's not bad though.
Amazing.
It's really amazing. My friend just did this documentary about DIY art and craft movement, and it did really well. But she's I don't know, $30,000 in the hole.
That's
normal.
Yeah, totally. That's everybody I've talked to in New York. They all have $20,000, $30,000.
Yeah, that's amazing.
On their credit cards.
Yeah, that's what she's doing. Yeah.
For films that will never come out. Mm-hmm. They'll never finish them, and so I consider this an absolute success. Well, one thing is that I do, with an exception of Todd and my sister, I do everything myself. So that's a huge thing. I don't hire anyone.
Yeah, that's true.
I edit it.
But you're flying around a lot and stuff.
That's really my main expense. If I lived here, it would be.
So you've been down in LA hanging out with Jared, and you talked to Jessica Espolito there. Yeah, that's rad. She's really tight with those guys.
Yeah,
fruit flies driving me crazy.
I was
my personal fruit fly.
Yeah, you should name it.
It's making me Herbert, my fruit fly.
I was giving her a hard time because she just started crying immediately, and I was like,
she started crying.
I was like,
oh, she's so sensitive.
I was like, usually somebody starts crying on the second tape.
That's so weird though, because she's really not an emotional person. She's really guarded. Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, totally. She's great.
She is great. Yeah.
She's really cool.
She's really still living the life, of
yeah.
You know what I mean? She goes out every night to every show and doesn't drive in LA, which is weird.
Oh, right.
She's always been the master of getting rides from all her friends. She's never driven a car and she never wants to.
That's crazy.
So she lives in LA. So she's it's an ongoing joke with all of her friends. She always calls you and she's like, hey, I thought of something really fun we could do tonight together. And where do you need a ride to? You obviously don't want to hang out with me. You just want to get a ride somewhere. But she'll always bill it as hey, there's this really cool thing I thought of you.
Yeah.
You're really?
I had a friend that would do that, but he would he'd try to make it fun by saying he would build it into some weird plan that he had.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. He'd be oh my God, I'm making
there's always an angle.
And
you're
this and that.
You just want to ride, don't you?
Yeah,
just
cut
to the chase.
There's a girl that he likes to
exactly. It was totally same with Jessica. It was always some guy at some show,
You're just
Jessica.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was hanging out with Chloe, what's her face? So I figured she probably hangs out a lot because all you ever hear about that girl is that Savini or whatever.
Oh, the Sev. We call her the Sev.
Yeah. Because
she used to be a really big Unwound fan.
Oh, really?
A long time ago, 10 years ago, she would kind of follow them around at shows in New York, and I don't know.
Yeah,
there's some rumors.
Of what?
I can't say because Justin will kill me.
Okay.
I don't know. I think she had a crush on one of the members of the band.
I see. Yeah, because I just always she just seems like she's out everywhere all the time.
Yeah, she's a scenester, right?
People are always
That's funny that Jessica's friends with her because she used to be Sev, the Sev, because she thought she was a
Did she live
vampire.
Here?
Jessica?
No, Chloe.
Oh no, she was just.
This was just in New York or in LA when they'd go there.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, funny.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That's funny.
All right. Okay. So basics of this is. So the first thing is it seems like we're having a conversation, but you want to try to treat it like it's not a conversation because I'm going to cut myself completely
Right,
out.
I'm not going to ask you questions or be like, right, Bill?
Well, yeah, referencing me is bad. But the other more subtle thing is that you want to make sure that all of your statements contain all the information with which to understand them.
Because you'll be cutting them.
Right. So
if you ask a question, should I repeat the question and the answer?
Yes, you can do that.
How did I meet them? Well.
Yeah, you could do it 2 different ways. You could be, say, if I said, how did you meet them? You could be like, I met blah 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 blah.
Not just, okay, not just
you
like
you also don't want
at
to
work.
right, exactly. You don't want it to be like incomplete. You don't want it to sound like it's an answer to a question.
Okay.
Either. So what? I mean, you don't have to worry about this too much. This is just stuff to remember if you can't remember. You know, if you do remember.
Yeah.
Uh,
So long ago, you know. I don't know how.
The other thing is that so you can just look at it like when it's less of like a question and like a topic on which to tell a story.
Okay.
But you should always just talk about whatever you think of, whatever
Okay.
you care to talk about.
Okay.
And then the last thing is to use proper pronouns rather than like they, he, it. You know, be like Chris, Jerry,
Oh, okay.
Carl, right?
Okay.
Um,
That's gonna be a toughie, but I'll try.
yeah. Well, yeah. And it can be cool. It can go in and out.
Okay.
And then the way I've just kind of been starting is to have you introduce yourself and tell me either how you met them or the first thing you think of when you think of them, or some kind of introductory type deal.
Are you rolling?
Yep.
I'm Sarah Utter and lifelong Olympia resident. And I met Carp, or I didn't even meet Carp. I just started going to shows as a bored teenager in Olympia in the early 90s. I was lucky to be, you know, at the right place at the right time, living in Olympia. There was a ton of all ages shows at the time. I didn't like music on the radio, but I didn't really know what my options were. Like other than that, I had no idea until my friend, a friend of mine that went to my high school, a really cool woman named Carla Gore, dragged me out to a show at the Capitol Theater backstage, and it was Unwound's first show after they changed from Giant Henry, and I think maybe like Cracker Bash and Spinanes and Heavens to Betsy, and after that I was just kind of gone. Like I would go to shows. It seemed like there were shows Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, matinees, all ages, nighttime, all ages, and that's when I saw Carp play for the first time, and here I am, age 34, still involved in the whole like punk scene, and I blame Carla for that.
So what was it like when you saw like there was this different option? Like what was that kind of like internally?
Well, yeah, the first punk show I ever went to, I think I was 16 years old, probably, you know, I don't know, 1991 maybe. And so I just kind of went on a lark. You know, my friend Carla was working at the punk rock movie theater, and she worked with Vern from Unwound. And, you know, it was a Friday night, nothing to do except maybe go to a movie or something. And then she said, well, you know, my friend, he's a projectionist at where I work. He has a band, and we could go see them play. And it's only $5 or something. And so, you know, I asked my mom for $5, and I went to the show, and I was, all I can say is I was just gone after that. I didn't know if I liked it. I didn't know if it made any sense to me at all, because at the time, like, those bands were so undeveloped and pretty raw, and I just knew that I felt like I belonged somewhere, and I felt like what I saw was exciting. But like I said, I thought maybe I hated a lot of it, but I still wanted to go see more.
So what were you doing before that night? Like, what were you into?
I was just kind of, you know, I wasn't cool, but I wasn't picked on. I was just kind of like, I was into art and music. My mom's an artist, my dad was a jazz musician, so it had always been really encouraged, but my parents also hated anything top 40. And so we kind of lived under this iron fist of classical music, jazz, and oldies. And I just didn't know what to do. I think I like would go to Rainy Day Records, just kind of looking around, and, you know, I think the first tape I bought, maybe, you know, trying to be cool, was like Camper Van Beethoven or some like kind of alternative college rock thing. And I still just I couldn't really figure out what was going on in music. I was clueless, basically. I mean, pre-internet, you know, my friend Carla would make me some mixtapes, and she was really like, really proactive about buying a lot of records. So I just hang out at her house after school and we'd listen to her records. And, I'd be like, oh, I don't like that. Or that's weird, doesn't make sense to me. A lot of them were I don't know. I just wasn't I was right at the time in my life where Riot Girl should have been really incredibly important to me because I was, 16-year-old girl from Olympia. But I feel like because I kind of grew up luckily in a household that really encouraged that girls could do whatever, play music, do art, whatever, that I was looking for something really more raw and loud. I think I was just more of a rock and roller. And so when I saw Carp, Unwound, Fits of Depression, Some Velvet Sidewalk, those were the bands that to me really blew my mind just because of the sheer volume and the energy and probably the wicked guitar playing.
So how would you describe Olympia as a town to someone who had no information?
Oh, well, I feel like I do this all the time because people really romanticize Olympia who have never been here or have just, appreciated the music that's come out from here. So I always tell them it's a town 4 blocks by 4 blocks squared, the downtown core. We have, it's mixed between loggers and state workers, sometimes conservative government employees and hicks. And there happens to be this weird pocket of strange people that do incredible things. And I think that a lot of that came from, Evergreen being in college here and then Chaos Radio, and that evolved into the Sub Pop fanzine and Op magazine, all these kind of really super olden days now, precursors to the whole Olympia scene, kind of where Calvin was coming out from, and then the Reiko Muse, Kathleen Hanna art gallery thing, and then it just evolved from there. So it could have been just a wasteland of hicks and tweakers and government employees, but somehow it got subverted by a bunch of weird artists.
Yeah, and that's the best description of Olympia, I think, by the way. The most concise, because it's so funny, you ask people, describe Olympia, and they'll be like, well, and then it's still very specific.
Yeah.
It's they're describing, one corner, insider information.
Right.
That was, general.
Good. Yeah, I feel like I do it all the time, when I lived in Los Angeles or just traveling in vans, we're like, oh, you're from Olympia. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Do you know Calvin? I'm
right.
Yeah, and
you just walked down the street.
Exactly. It's I had a friend when I was 19 who was from Tacoma, and he thought the Olympia scene was really funny. He's like, I just picture everybody skipping downtown, holding hands, eating saltwater taffy because of Beat Happening songs. It just seemed like this really twee, idyllic, picking apples, and I'm like, it's got a lot of darkness. Probably a lot to do with the weather, but I mean, It's probably one of the hardest drinking places I've lived. Outside of Tacoma, which is the hardest really drinking place. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about it's this pocket, right, of people. So what is Olympia surrounded by? What is the outlying regions like?
What do you mean? Just how we're stuck between two big cities,
or
do you mean more the hick towns, or
maybe start geographically and then maybe culturally?
Okay. Well, Olympia is this really small place between 2 major cities, Seattle and Portland, both of which used to be incredibly divey and crusty and gritty and full of, junkies, and which both in different ways have turned into these bizarre fancy pants places. And I feel like I speak for, I speak for myself, but I'm going to say that I speak for most Olympians when you'll say that Seattle sucks and Portland's cooler. And I don't know why that is. Although I've noticed recently that a lot of people in Olympia people who have continued to live here into their 30s have this animosity towards Portland because it's become this utopia for, upwardly mobile, eco-friendly artists and other people. I don't know. But you go there to have babies is what I decided. You grow up in Olympia, you're a punk rocker, and then you hit 30 and you're like, I want to have a baby. And you move to Portland because there's baby green baby co-ops on every corner or something, which is totally, that's bad. I really like Portland. I don't want to diss it. Olympia, though, is just, I feel like it's just one little town in just the myriad of the Northwest's tiny, weird towns. You know, we've got the Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater tri-town area, which it's not a tri-city because it's too small, but Olympia is just one continuous blob that goes on one side of Tumwater and Lacey. And so Lacey is like, when I was a kid, I always thought Lacey, because I'm from Olympia, I'm from the west side. Okay, Lacey is full of mustaches and Camaros, and then Olympia is like a little bit more evolved. It's got this art and music scene and government, it's a little bit more refined. And then Tumwater is just farms and big strapping football players. And so that's kind of my geographic description of the tri-town area as seen through the eyes of maybe like a 13-year-old. Now it just seems like the stop on the I-5 corridor where bands used to come a lot and play, and they don't seem to come here anymore. I don't know why. A lot of really great bands came here in the early 90s. It was always like a must go-to stop. It was Olympia, and now they always skip for Seattle and Portland. We're kind of been left behind the dust.
Well, you ended that on such a sad note.
It's sad. I don't know. I mean, I think actually that's a total generalization, and people that go to more shows than I do now would totally disagree. There's a million house shows going on, and probably with really awesome bands. I just listen to world music now. I'm out of the loop.
There's not enough world music touring bands.
Those like awesome bands from Mali and stuff never come to Olympia.
Okay, so how would you describe then the Pacific Northwest?
Ooh,
the whole region.
The whole region. Well, gray, rainy, damp, soggy, really beautiful, full of strange people, loggers, logging trucks, drinking, lots of drinking, dampness, cold basements, mold, mountains, ocean, a lot of beauty, but kind of enveloped in this damp, dank wrapping. I think it makes people, everybody always says, regionally, like, oh, Southern people are really friendly and all that stuff. And I think people in the Northwest are a little keep to themselves. And I almost feel like it's something to do with like this gray, low ceiling that we have all the time. And also in a town like Olympia, where you're in such a close proximity with your friends and your music community or whatever, you kind of just tend to like create little walls around yourself to give yourself some space. So I've been told by other people that visit the Northwest that it seems like everybody here is really paranoid. And I don't know what to make of that. I think there's lots of woods, and woods are, can be beautiful but a little creepy, and I don't know, people think that, Olympia people are a little insular and paranoid.
Well, also regionally, I think we have more like serial killers and weird crimes like that than most other regions.
We do, and Aberdeen, I believe, I don't know if it still holds the record, but it used to hold the record for the highest suicide rate in the country. So tough economic times with all that cutting down of the trees, and then maybe there's some sort of karmic payback for just decimating forests. But I don't know. Yeah. Yeah,
I think it's going to be the weather too, because I read recently that I can't remember which specific tribe they were talking about, but they were saying that like nationally the Native Americans tribes, like pre-contact, they referred to the Northwest as symbolically as the land of the bear, and what the bear symbolized was introspection.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
They felt the same way about it that Western society, when they got here, felt about it too. Yeah. Was that it's a place where you go to look inside. Huh. Which is funny. Know that. Yeah, it's funny because the East Coast is the exact opposite.
Right.
Where you go to. thing.
Yeah.
And the 11,000 years that Native Americans inhabited Manhattan Island pre-contact, they also used it for the same thing that we use it now too. They didn't live there; it was commerce.
Interesting.
They used it just to trade.
Yeah.
So it speaks very strongly of like the natural elements that shape us.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
That is really interesting. I just did I got a grant. My friend and I got a grant from the city of Olympia to do a series of these. Well, there's a couple here of letterpress posters about the history of Olympia. And so we kind of tried to do this subversive one. And we did one about the original native tribes that lived in this area. And the name for Olympia was su1, place of the bear. So it's interesting that the bear does, to the tribes around here, represent an insular, a looking in on oneself. And I think that's what, the kind of the vibe of the community here. I did notice when I went to New York for the first time I flew on an airplane, I went to New York when I was 19, and I just couldn't believe it how everybody in Manhattan looks you in the eye. Because here we do a lot of this. Like you're like, I don't see you. I'm just walking down the street, keeping to my own business. And there, everybody's like, I think as a safety precaution, looking you in the eye, so you don't get jacked or whatever. But I really liked it. It was a little disconcerting, but I liked it a lot.
Like checking everybody out.
Yeah, it was just like, I don't know. I feel like here a lot of you tend to like, and maybe this is an Olympia thing because it's such a small place. I mean, it's growing, like the population is growing, but actually, like, the punk community or whatever you want to say, the scene or whatever, is just such a small entity that you just naturally have to kind of build these little walls around yourself to exist and to not lose your mind. So I think a lot of people tend, at least I do a lot of, walking down the street, like, hi, oh yes, good to see you. I don't really want to chit chat because I don't actually know you. I just have to say hello because we're familiar strangers and that whole thing. So. And
you have a life.
And I have a life, and I also work. Yeah, I got stuff to do. So it's funny when my mom comes. My parents used to live here, but they moved to Tacoma, and now when my mom walks around downtown with me, like she'll come visit and we'll walk around. She's like, "You're so popular. You know everybody, and everybody knows you." And I'm like, it's not because I'm popular, Mom. It's just the life of like a downtown Ole resident. There's like no space. You have to say hello to everybody. And it's not about, when I moved to LA, I missed it. It was like a shock to my system because it's so vast there and so not about community and so just about really chronic loneliness. And, but as I lived there for 3 years, I really got into the fact that I could just go anywhere and do anything and not have to chit chat. It was nice. It was a freedom.
Yeah, definitely. I think when first 10 minutes I was back in Bellingham having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, same thing.
Interrupted by someone, and I was just like stupefied.
Yeah.
Like we were having a conversation with a friend, like one of my brother practically that I haven't seen in like 3 years, and here's this woman walks up and she's like, I've met her maybe twice, and she's telling me this long story about how her brother has a band, she hopes it's good and all this stuff, and just looking at her
you're like,
what the fuck are you doing?
Like, I'm trying to, do you see that? Yeah, it's weird, huh? Bellingham and Olympia have a lot of parallels, I think.
I was also thinking of that when you were talking about the dislike for Seattle.
Yeah, we hate
Everybody
Seattle.
in Bellingham just moves to Portland.
Yeah, it's just a go-to now. Yeah, it used to be because Portland was a lot more affordable or something, but now we just all decided that Seattle's boring. I shouldn't say that because people will get mad at me.
I won't use that.
Okay.
I don't dislike Seattle. Not after being in New York for nearly 10 years.
Yeah, I don't dislike it. I'm just kind of, it's all right.
I did when I lived in Bellingham.
You did?
Oh, yeah.
For how many years?
It culturally doesn't have anything in common with Bellingham.
It's just so sceney in a different way. Like, the stranger and stuff, so snarky. I just kind of hate it. I don't know.
It's weird. It's always seemed to me like, kind of like the small town in Washington, Portland, Oakland, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Like, there's these weird areas that
I always thought it wasn't really it's like a fake big city, but that's just all my family is from Seattle originally, like my parents and my aunts and uncles. So we spent a lot of time as a kid going there, and I think maybe I just got bored with it at a young age because I actually tried to live there when I was, I don't know, 18 or 19, like right after my first year of school, and I lasted a month and was like, yeah. I didn't even drink coffee, so it was like,
You're like, what am I gonna do?
I was like, why am I living in Seattle? I don't even like coffee. It's like, what else do you do?
You like beer though, don't you?
I do, but I was like 19, so I mean, it was just pointless. And Capitol Hill just seems stuck, like still like in some weird like early 90s. I don't get it.
Oh, dude! Every time I pull into Seattle,
It's like gothy and grungy.
I can't even believe it. I feel like I'm walking into the set of Reality Bites or something.
Exactly. I'm like, it's just like too cliche,
I'm almost
right?
a little embarrassed because like back home, I'm like telling people about it. And they're like, "Oh, grunge." I'm like, "No, like blah blah blah." And then I get up the thing, and then there's like a dude with a flannel around his waist.
Yeah, like Doc Martens
like,
and
long
like
ponytail, like shaved around the
yeah,
sides.
or like
linens,
jester
like
hat or something.
wool,
You're like
jacket this long and boots, and just like
you're like,
never mind.
Lollapalooza was rad. Yeah, it's really weird. I don't know. I should give it another chance. I haven't hung out there for a while.
It's pretty.
It is really beautiful.
All my family lives there.
My family loves it. They're like, it's the best city in the world.
It's very clean.
It's tidy.
It's nice.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about carp.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. What about how would you describe just the general description of like each of those guys? We can start with Jared if you want. Like if you're
Okay.
introducing them to someone who didn't know them.
Okay. If I was to introduce carp to people who had never met them or heard of them, let's see. I would say, well, actually, I'll start with Chris because I probably know him the best of those guys. Can be a total asshole, and he knows it. Really smart, and with a really sharp wit that could cut you down. I think the first time I didn't even meet him. The first time I had an encounter with him was at some house party. I don't know, maybe in like 1992 or something. I can't remember. I mean, Carp wasn't playing. It was like, I think it was like Fits of Depression and Bikini Kill playing in a basement. And is the camera thing okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Oh, that's normal.
So I'm at this party. I'm, an insecure high schooler. I have braces and like I had really long hair and like was probably wearing a flannel. I was not by any means a cool kid, which is interesting because you think like in like the punk scene that it doesn't matter if you're cool or not because it's all inclusive, but it really did, especially at that time. It was, if you didn't have the right clothes and you weren't friends with all the people, then you're kind of, outside of it. And that's fine. Like I was just there to experience music and stuff. But I remember sitting in this living room of some house on the east side. I think it was a Halloween party. And I look over and this guy is just doing this to me from across the room for like 5 minutes. And I'm like, oh, that's that guy, Chris from Carp. I wonder what I've done to anger him so. And so he just was staring me down, giving me the finger, and I just wrote it off. I was like, okay, I don't know, not my problem. So that was the first time I met Chris. And then when I actually met him was when I got a job at the Dollar Movie Theater, which I'm sure people have talked a lot about in this documentary, but the punk rock State Tri Cinemas. And so my first day on the job, I am assigned to work behind the concessions counter because that's where when you start out, you're in concessions. And lo and behold, like I walk in and Chris, two people work behind the counter, and Chris is my trainer or I guess boss or something for the day. And he makes fun of my pants and asks me if I think I'm cool now because I work at the Dollar Theater, all in a very acerbic tone. And I just kind of clammed up and tried to shovel popcorn the best I could and ignore him. So that was my first impression of Chris. And I don't know, he could be a real antagonizer because he's super smart and he's got a little bit of a mean streak sometimes. And he's one of those people that I was afraid to even talk to because I just knew he would like flip back some like quick-witted comment about me and something. So, but in general, I would describe Chris as a really, uh, you know, really talented. He has a little bit more of the that dark side that we all have, but I think Chris was he was more it was more upfront in his personality. Jared, class.
Let me ask you something
Okay.
real quick. Did you like you talking about like this like kind of like negativity? Was it your idea that it was like experiential or like biological?
I think that there was just so in the punk scene. There was just so many kind of misfits and kids just kind of battling against something, where there was like the community at their high school or the family issues and stuff like that, and I really identified with that. So while I didn't really adopt kind of an attitude of wanting to be an antagonizer, when I saw someone like Chris or whoever, lots of other folks being like that, I just figured it was coming from a lot of experience with some heavy stuff. So, I would sometimes get my feelings hurt, but I just always kind of kept it in this place of like, well, we've all gone through a lot of shit, and I think that's why we're all gravitating towards the punk scene. And so, I'm not going to really hold it against you.
Is it also kind of like in a way, is it kind of like exciting? Like you see somebody that's not like standing for something, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I think with other people it seemed exciting, like definitely with the whole Riot Girl scene, which I really wasn't involved in, but I would go to a lot of shows, and there's a lot of just really intense energy, coming from a lot of these really amazing women that were definitely standing for something, standing up for feminism, being women, and that was really exciting. I think with Chris or whoever, people kind of who could tend to be more antagonistic, it was just like, no, it wasn't exciting. I dreaded it sometimes, but I understood it, I think. So Jared, I would categorize as extremely solid person. Like, I don't know, like they were such jokesters, the three of them. Like, I almost feel like Carp was almost like a cartoon come to life sometimes, because they were all so like these really specific characters. I think a Saturday morning Carp cartoon could have been really awesome. So Jared to me just always struck me as extremely solid, very caring, very I feel like he was always like in long-term relationships, like always cared deeply about the women he dated and his friends, but he was he has that extreme comedic bent. I think he did some musical theater in high school or junior high, and so he has that. He can be. I mean, he hosted karaoke at the bar that I used to work at. He's just like got that real MC, like hilarious, totally huge quick wit, but he wouldn't really use it to cut people down as much as just kind of flip shit and make people laugh. And so I always, or I still do, have a lot of respect for him, and he's a good guy. And Scott Jernigan was always really fascinating to me. We weren't very close at all. We did work at the Dollar Movie Theater together. He was a projectionist, so he was kind of upstairs and away from the world that I was in. But he always, to me, Scott was like, he was constantly reinventing his look, which I thought was totally fascinating. Like for a while, he'd be like wearing a cowboy hat with like greasy, long blonde hair, riding a BMX bicycle, and he was totally obsessed with it, and that was just his thing. And it was just Scott. And then he would change into like, he went through a period where he was almost like an anime character. Like he got really into anime, and he had these like spiked dark, like he looked just like straight out of Japanimation cartoon. And so, I don't know, Scott was just like, he had that infectious laugh and that real intensity where you're like, God, I would never want to be on your bad side, even though I don't think he had a bad side. But he could like give you that, like, you know, that the eyeball, the stare down, and then just burst into that crazy laugh that I think anyone who knew him would describe as his like signature thing. Was he had this really husky, like deep, huge, smiley, toothy laugh. Like he was kind of, I think he could do a really good Tony Robbins impersonation. I think he did that. But yeah, Scott was interesting, always kind of changing his outward look.
That's the second time that someone's referenced Tony Robbins
With Scott. I think because he knew that he kind of, that was when the Tony Robbins infomercials were on all the time in that, like, the early 90s. And I think Scott got into this idea that he could do a really wicked Tony Robbins impersonation because he had that big smile, you know? Yeah, so.
Can you explain really quick who Tony Robbins is?
Tony Robbins was like this, I mean, I guess he's still around, but this motivational speaker who did seminars on personal power. And they would show these infomercials on late at night where it was like, Tony Robbins, personal power. And he had this insane toothy smile where it didn't even look real. And so people would pay thousands of dollars to go to these seminars. And I think the infomercials would show clips of people like in a conference, you know, or like at a conference center place, like jumping up in their seats like, yes, I can do it. Tony Robbins gave me personal power. And he would sell tapes and, you know, I don't know. Somebody I knew went to one as a joke and said it was actually really amazing, which scared me because, yeah, obviously he's some kind of scammer.
Yeah, seems weird. I think I saw a movie with him in it, but yeah. So how would you describe the three of them together?
Comedy troupe. Total comedy troupe with maybe a lot of internal tension because they were friends for so long. They're all three really strong personalities. But a comedy troupe, I mean, when the three of them or even just two of them were hanging out, it was like a contest to like see who could like flip the most shit back and forth, like a ping pong game, or they'd, you know, get into characters and do weird skits. It was some kind of Tumwater High School phenomenon because like like Justin and Brant from Unwound do the same thing, and something about that time period in Tumwater bred a very specific kind of humorous but very biting wit amongst the punkers.
Now that when you're talking about that, like kind of, you know, I'm assuming you kind of mean like sarcastic, like that kind of just like biting wit,
but really smart.
How do you think that relates? Is that an Olympia sense of humor, or do you know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like, well, maybe it is. Maybe it's some kind of defense mechanism about living. It's, you know, it does have that kind of run a parallel to kind of like a high school or junior high world when you're living in a town that's so small, and then when you're existing in a like the music community, which is even smaller, you kind of have to, you know, develop those kind of defense mechanisms to exist. So maybe I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like it's some kind of common like misanthropic like artist punker thing though, because tons of my other friends that grew up, you know, in the Bay Area or New York or whatever have the same deal. I've never been able to do it very well. I was actually kind of scared of a lot of those guys, like Justin. Not scared, but like the Carp guys and like Justin, Trosper and stuff, like they're just so, they could just sometimes be a little bit like antagonistic just to see if you could keep up with them, and I can't. Like I just don't have that bent to me where I want to play that game basically. So I would just get really nervous. Like if I used to live at Lucky Seven House and Justin would come over to practice or whatever, and I'd be like, oh God, he's gonna like, you know, when I was like 19, he's gonna like say something about my shoes and see if I have like the wherewithal to like challenge him back on it, and I never did. I was just kind of like, why are you so not being nice to me? I don't know. I felt like it was a contest sometimes. Totally entertaining though, from like an outside perspective. Yeah.
Well, some of that's probably flirting, I would imagine.
No,
No?
not then. I don't think. I don't know. Maybe I have low self-esteem, but I don't think so.
What was your impression of what the Carp guys like meant to each other?
To each other, it just seemed like Jared and Chris and Scott were really close friends. You know, like I feel like there's this thing when you're in a band where it's, you know, with your friends, where it's almost like an us against the world kind of mentality, and so there's a lot of tension when you're in a band just because you're in such close quarters. You do a lot of traveling. There's artistic difference. There's ego, and all of that. But I just felt like they were just, you know, these guys that would probably do anything for each other, even though maybe sometimes they hated each other. I don't know. They had the thing when I would see them play sometimes on stage where I could definitely sense a tension, and I think in a band, it makes for a really good show. Yeah. So.
Yeah, describe what that was like. That kind of show